For meditation, I want people to understand it's not about shutting the thoughts off. It's about observing the thoughts.
This is Entrepreneurs the Playbook, where I give you access each week to the world's greatest athletes and executives about their personal and professional playbook and what has made them champions on and off the field. This is the Playbook. This is Dave Meltzer, CEO of Sports One Marketing with Entrepreneurs the Playbook. And I have the world is too small guest, because I can't believe you're sitting here, Matt Santoro.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, man.
Welcome to the Playbook.
Of course.
Matt, you and I met in this weird way, which is now a common way for me, is that I'm sitting on an airplane with Andre Reed, Hall of Fame wide receiver, who everyone on the plane knows, right? He's the Hall of Famer, 4 Super Bowls, and I'm sitting there with him, and my media guy looks at me, he goes, "Oh my God, Dave, that's Matt Santoro," right? And I'm like, who?
Yeah.
Right? The same way now, just a year later, because I had no following back then, people were like, "Oh my God, that's Dave Meltzer." And meanwhile, Warren Moon, my business partner, is sitting right next to me, and people will come up to me, and he's kind of like shying away, like they're going to say hi to him, and they're like, "Oh man, I see you every day."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Talk about that transition of how we go from just being normal idiots into people literally loving us like we're Hall of Fame receivers or quarterbacks.
Well, it can be a difficult transition, especially if it's overnight. And when I say overnight, for me, it took 4 years to be an overnight success, right? And that's what I tell people.
That's still short, though. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's what I say to people all the time. It can take 10 years to be an overnight success because people don't see all the hours in the basement and all the hours alone being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is a glamorous thing nowadays, but the truth is it's not. It's actually a lot of hard work, a lot of sadness, a lot of isolation, rejection, failure. So people only see this. They only see the airplanes and literally, by the way, like jets. People are posting, them in front of a jet.
Yeah, you gotta love like wheels up and like, jet smarter, right? Like, everyone owns a big ass jet.
Yeah, which is so not the case at all. And by the way, if you're an entrepreneur, unless you're like a Mark Zuckerberg sort of level, if you're an entrepreneur, you shouldn't be out there buying jets and stuff like that. Like, live humbly. And I shouldn't say shouldn't, because you should enjoy your money. If you earn your money, enjoy the money, enjoy it, spend it however you want. But I feel like a real hustler is willing to live humbly and put that money back into the business and continue growing, as opposed to being flashy and having this crazy lifestyle.
Yeah, and I've done both in my career.
Of course.
Right? So,
well, I have too. And especially if you don't come from money.
Right, like us.
100%.
Right?
I
came from kids, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Small towns.
100%. Only child, right?
I had 6, which is worse because that's less money.
Yeah, there you go. So no children here, but
right.
But yeah, I mean, I came from a small town, only child. I was never really broke, but I didn't have any money. I always had a little bit of savings.
Just enough.
Yeah, just enough from like frying chicken at a grocery store, really basic stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah, but then when I started making good money and I started making like 6 figures, it's like, whoa, like this is real money now, And so there was one year, I think 2015 was the year that I really spent a lot. And I was just because I wasn't used to it, but it took a long time to get to the point where it was kind of like this. If you looked at a graph, there was a peak and then it dropped back off. So I went from not spending much to spending a lot, and now I'm back to I don't like to spend unless it's something I'm really passionate about. Like shoes, for example. I'm a sneakerhead. I can't help it. I just love shoes. I like collecting shoes. It's something I discovered out here in Los Angeles. But I don't frivolously waste my money.
Yeah, see, I was a millionaire 9 months out of law school, and then very thrifty. Like I wore the same, because I thought they were lucky, socks for 3 years. I had 4 suits that were hand-me-downs, never bought, for 3 years. I was making millions living, and then I went on that peak. What stopped me was losing everything.
That will stop you, yes.
And that'll keep, so I go from Ferraris, Porsches, and things like that, Rancho Santa Fe homes, and to, I drove my Volt, and I still do, to remind me, whatever I can do to remind me that everything's coming through me for others, not for me. Radical humility, because I love to make money. I'm a huge, I don't know what it is about me. I love to make it, but now it's for everyone else because I've already gone through the gamut. In fact, I tell people all the time with the jets, and I joke around, I know how to run tail numbers, right? And I take pictures, I'm like, that's not that guy's jet. that's jet, or they take pictures. I'm like, that jet's not even in Orange County.
Yeah, the Bow Wow Challenge. Remember the Bow Wow Challenge?
Yeah, right. Well, you mentioned something earlier that really piqued my interest. And I love to talk about it, but I love to get other people's perspective.
Sure.
No. How do you deal with no? What's your philosophy of dealing with the no's? Because everyone gets them.
Yeah.
Especially if you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a good question. How I deal with no's is, I deal with no's the same way that I deal with any perceived bad things. And I say perceived because...
Right, because everything's perception.
Yes, absolutely. Nothing is either good nor bad, only thinking makes it so. Shakespeare said that.
Right.
And I think it's very true. I mean, anything that happens in your life can be absolutely perceived as a positive thing. And even what you would consider negative things, like, for example, say a family member dying. Well, that is objective. Most people would say that's objectively like a sad thing. However, there's always something to be learned from that, and there's always a positive from it. For example, that may be the catalyst that brings your family together. Say your family isn't very close. You know what I'm saying?
Like for me, losing money was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Right.
And I really mean that.
Yeah. Well, I can give you my example.
Yeah, please.
So, what I want to hear yours as well. But for me, I had my peak viewership around 2014, 2015. I was getting 40 million views a month, and it all came at once, and it was just boom, right? But with that, because I was not prepared for it, and I didn't have the mind state I have now, which is I've been meditating for a year. I'm very much into mindfulness and spirituality. I didn't have that at the time. And so my ego took over. It was just this, when my popularity rose and my money rose, so did my ego, and all these bad people came into my life, and I was a very lost person, quite literally. I didn't know who I was anymore. Yeah. And when that started to cool off, it caused me tremendous anxiety because I thought, oh my God, I am completely identified with the numbers. The numbers equal my value, therefore my value's dropping, and now I'm being depressed and it's freaking me out. But over time, I realized that that was the best thing that ever happened to me because it forced me to seek out things like meditation and things, which made me realize that my value as a human being is not tied to the numbers. So, and then that opened up my world to a whole bunch of other things. So had that not happened, who knows where I'd be today? Maybe I would be someone that my ego would just continuously take over, and that leads to a whole gambit of other issues. It's
interesting because meditation was one of the most significant things when I went through what I call my quantum shift. And that's what I would call what you went through. It's a quantum shift. I meditate every day. I theta meditate. I've studied in India.
Nice.
Mindfulness is the key to my success and happiness, and the pursuit of my potential is done through the state of calmness and potential. What motivated you, through, because people go the different way. I always say if I didn't lose everything, I would probably be dead.
Right.
Because I was with the wrong people, the wrong idea, with an ungodly amount of money, doing, and I'm just blessed to have the mom and the wife and the best friend that I had that all within a week basically said, you are a lost soul.
Yeah.
And, and my dad telling me, who I didn't get along with too much, literally telling me that I was going to be the richest man in the cemetery. And that's really not where I should be. Yeah. But all those things came to me, and I learned my wife was spiritual. What pushed you, of all things, into meditation?
I don't like using the term rock bottom because I really don't feel like I truly hit rock bottom.
I'll show you my story.
Sure.
I'll go on your podcast and tell you the real story. I'll make you cry.
Let's do it. Let's do it. But I hit a really, really low point where I was waking up daily with anxiety, depressed. I felt completely out of control with my mind and my thoughts. And it was a real struggle every day. And I just got to the point where I said, I can't do this anymore, and that's the thing, is that's the catalyst with everything with human beings, we really don't make a change until it gets to a really bad point, and then we say, okay, now I have to make a change, right? So for me, I got to that point, and I remember it was my 32nd birthday, I believe, and I spent the day crying in my bed.
Oh.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking, and that was the day where I realized, I can't do this anymore. This is not... And the interesting thing was I really had everything going for me. I couldn't see it at the time, though,
Sure.
And I just decided I'm not going to do this anymore. And there was 3 things that really changed me: was medication, meditation, and what's the third thing? Well, medication, meditation, and therapy.
Yeah.
And I always tell people.
Damn, I thought it was 3 M's.
Yeah,
I think I say medication, meditation, and Meltzer. I read Dave Meltzer's book, and bam, that's my therapy.
Meditation, and therapy. And, so the way that I explain to people is I notice in this country, in America, drugs are very much a part of the culture here. I come from Canada. It's very different there, and I would argue other places in the world as well, where medication's more of a last resort. Here, I find the culture's first resort.
Yeah.
And I remember being a kid growing up, seeing like, why are there so many drug commercials in America? Like, we don't have those in Canada, but here it's like, take this, may cause side effect, you might poop your lung out. Like anything could happen, right?
That's so good.
And I'm like, why would you take that? But for me, so when I came here, moving to LA ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me because I ended up trying some medication, and that got me out of the hole. And that's the way I explain it to people is medication's really not, for most people, a long-term solution. There has to be more to it. There has to be something that now pushes you beyond the initial getting out of the hole. So I was in a dark hole. Medication kind of got me out of that, and then from there I thought, okay, now I'm on stable footing again. Now therapy and meditation is going to take me farther. And that's what it did. And meditation to this day is something that continuously is something that builds my mindfulness and consciousness on a daily basis.
And I love that. I teach mindfulness, consciousness, talking about the subconscious and unconscious. I study the ego.
Yeah.
And I could tell by previous comments that you've made, even in this interview, that you are starting to get a real grasp on ego. How do you define, number one, your ego, and two, what practice do you have to be aware of? Because people just asked me in the interview just before this, well, you said that, you're afraid of things.
Yeah.
I can't believe someone that's always teaching and writing books and doing all this are still afraid. I'm like, yeah, but I just go back to center quickly. How do you, number one, define ego, and two, when you're aware when you're in an ego place?
Well, they're kind of one and the same. So the way that I define the ego is compulsive thinking. As human beings, we have one of the greatest gifts we have is the ability to think. It's the way that we've built everything on this earth that has advanced us as a human, species. But the problem with thinking is that it's become a compulsion for human beings. So it's an important tool, but the problem is we don't know how to put that tool down. And this is the cause of all anxiety, all depression. It's just this incessant chatter, 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 chatter. That's why people can't sleep at night. How many people have you ever heard that say, I can't sleep at night, my mind just races? Yeah. That's the ego taking over at night. And so that's the way that I define the ego. But it's interesting that you asked that question because just yesterday, I had a major breakthrough. Maybe it was serendipitous that we're doing this now.
Always.
But I went into a sensory deprivation tank. Have you ever been in one?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, so what happened with me, now before I tell you, I've heard many things about a sensory deprivation tank. I've heard that you can hallucinate. I've heard some people, they who knows, there's lots of different things, lose their mind sometimes.
Yeah.
But for me, I laid down and I felt I was prepared because I have been meditating for a long time. I laid down and I had a CBD stick before I went in, which is, for those that don't know, in marijuana, there's THC and there's CBD. THC is the psychoactive. CBD just kind of gives you very laser-like focus.
Well, and entrepreneurship is one of the fastest growing spaces.
Right. It's
completely
a beautiful
legal
thing.
everywhere.
Yeah, great healing properties. The stigma is really going away from all that. THC is not for me, by the way. It makes me really freaking lazy.
And hungry.
And I get anxious because I'm the type of person that needs to be doing stuff. Yeah, and I don't like being lazy, and I just lay in bed. Sativa and indica both do that. I can't do it. So CBD is a beautiful thing, though, in small quantities. So take that. 15 minutes into laying in this pool. And for those that don't know, a sensory deprivation tank is a shallow amount of water, very, very buoyant water that's filled with Epsom salts. So you can lay in it, and you don't sink into the water. You actually kind of lay on the surface of it. It's an incredible thing.
Like the Dead Sea.
Like the Dead Sea, exactly. Very salty. Door closes, lights go off. Music plays for 5 minutes and then fades, and then you're just silence and darkness. And it's really interesting because the mind's chattering, but then after about 15 minutes, I don't know if it's because the CBD kicked in, but I just got this laser-like focus where I was just very present and I was focusing on my breath. And then half an hour into it, this is amazing. half an hour into it, I confronted my ego for the first time. Really confronted. I saw my ego. Whoa. And it manifested itself.
So I'm gonna stop you. Yeah. You saw your ego. People, because I do this myself, right? I do transcendental. I see things. Explain what you mean by I saw my ego, because people are probably thinking there's like a little, mat.
I mean, the ego. I mean, what do you want?
Just like because people when I say meditation, because so many people want to meditate, and they're like, well, what do you see? What I'm like, it's just an awareness. So I was hoping you could kind of describe the awareness of your ego. Like what that meant to you when you say I saw my ego. Was it just an energy? Was it a color?
Well,
was
for
there
me,
a form?
This is a little more advanced than the average person, I would say, because you're not going to see your ego.
That's what I wanted to
get to.
The average
person is just going to be you become aware.
Correct.
Of your ego.
Good.
I literally saw my ego, which was insane. I'll explain what it looked like in a second.
Yeah, let's go there though.
But through meditation, what happens is most people are completely identified with their ego, and through meditation, you'll actually become separated even just a little bit from your ego. Right. Even just to get a little sliver of distance between you and ego, it can take years. So it takes a long time, especially for me. I'm 33.
Ego edges goodness out of your life. That's what I call it. Ego
100%.
Edge goodness out.
And I'm very passionate about this. That's why I keep talking about it. But
well, I'm loving
if you don't mind,
keep going,
and I'll get to what I saw.
No, this is all me.
But for meditation, I want people to understand it's not about shutting the thoughts off. It's about observing the thoughts. That's the difference. Yeah. And because everyone I talk to is like, oh, I tried it, but I couldn't shut the thoughts off. That's not what you're trying to do. The only people that can shut their thoughts off are the Zen masters that are on a mountaintop somewhere that are meditating for 8 hours a day for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly, 20 years.
We live in the real world. We can't do that. We're running businesses. It's not possible. So for us, it's about viewing them. But anyway, back to the ego.
Yeah, thanks.
So this beautiful thing happened. I'm there, 30 minutes in, I visualize this floating ghost-like demon thing. It was an evil presence. And I realized that's what I've been seeing for the last year since I've been aware of my ego. I've been angry at it. I thought it's this dysfunction of evolution that's in our brains. I hate you, I hate you. And then something different happened. It stepped aside and there was a black curtain. And in the corner of the black curtain, there was a sliver of light, like something was behind it. So I walked up to it and I moved the black curtain aside. And all I saw was this all infinitely white, bright room, just white. And in the corner of the room, there was a little girl in all white, kind of faceless, glowing white, but she was gripping her knees and she was scared and she was crying. And that was my ego. Whoa. And I realized that the ego was not something to be feared and angry towards. The ego is something that needs love and compassion because it's this scared, lost little child inside all of us that needs that love and compassion. And I've been angry at it this whole time.
I actually define my ego as fear of loss.
Yeah, of course.
And you just described fear of loss.
That's exactly what it is.
Right.
And I walked up to this little girl and I grabbed her hand and I said, I will guide you. And it's hard for me not to get emotional because I cried for an hour and a half after that. I cried for an hour and a half because all this emotional vomit came out. It was a year. It was actually basically 33 years of my life of not understanding what the ego was. And then a year of understanding what the ego was, but that cork still didn't pop. It was just kind of, I saw the cork for the first time. But yesterday that cork came out and I cried for 10 minutes in the actual deprivation tank in the chamber. And when I came out, it all came out. And I wasn't upset. It was a joyful release of understanding of what this thing really was. And I felt like it was a new beginning for me because even today, every day it's a struggle with my ego. But the difference today was instead of getting angry, I kept saying to it, I will guide you. I will guide you. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment.
Wow.
Yeah, it was powerful.
That's awesome.
It was really powerful.
Yeah, and I think, I believe everything happens at the right time in the perfect place, and you being on here the day after.
Mm-hmm. And side note, I also thought it was very interesting that it manifested as a little girl. A girl specifically. I don't know. And I think I've always sort of gravitated towards feminine energy. All of my best friends are girls. I have more girlfriends than guys. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny because I grew up with all boys and a girl, and until I became vulnerable. And then all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, people were like, well, you have this great mix of feminine and masculine energy, where I was in resistance because of my ego of any feminine energy. And I was abused as a child as well. Sexually abused, which probably created even more resistance. So it's really, really interesting. I've never heard someone actually define it that way. It was awesome. Okay, last question, because we're gonna have to do this again.
I could go on forever. This could be like a 3-hour podcast. I love talking about this because I mean, I'm an educator. That's what I do on YouTube.
Right.
I give facts and things like that, but it goes so much deeper than that. As a human being, I realized that I just love facts, and I love when I really understand and believe something, I just need to tell people that.
And you do it really well. Like,
thank you.
You know, on you, even with the best 5, you know, the top 5 and all that, watching everything, and you know, at least in the time that we've met at JFK till now. And I've modeled some of my stuff because you're real. You know what I mean? There's an authenticity to what you do. And I always say, I think it's working for me because I just found my frequency. And when I listen and watch you, I'm like, this dude has his frequency. Right? Which is why I wanted, you know, even to have you on my podcast and go on yours, because I think like we have this frequency, this level of vibration. What have you found now through this, I call it a quantum shift that you've obviously gone through? What's your new purpose, right? Because you're still really young. Do you have like a good frequency of purpose, or is it varied? You know, what purpose do you think you have now on this journey?
I think I don't have a new purpose. I think I found my purpose that's always been inside of me, which is
I was gonna say the purpose found you.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I don't look at it as any sort of you know, messiah sort of, I'm here to teach people. It's more so whenever I can enlighten people as to what the ego is, even if they just have a glimpse of understanding of it, and really it takes a long time to really understand what the ego is. You can hear it, but until you really meditate and understand what this thing is, it can take a long time. I just really love explaining to people, like, listen, I know you're really upset right now. I don't take that personally. This is your ego talking. But one thing I love is that whenever I talk to people about what we're talking about right now, unlike any other thing you can talk about, there's something that resonates deeply inside of people where they just focus on my words. And I can tell they might not understand what I'm saying, but there's a deep, deep part of them that identifies the truth behind the words that I'm saying, and the beliefs that we have, and the fact that there is an ego, and you know. So that's my favorite thing, and I don't know if that's my purpose.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But if there was a purpose, it would definitely be to help alleviate suffering from other humans.
Yeah, well, you definitely, I think, you know, really liberate others with your light, to let them show their own light, and you do that through an emotional connection.
Thanks.
Even though you take highly complex issues sometimes. And I agree, some people may not be able to absorb all the content because of their own awareness, their own vibration, but for sure, if you can connect on the emotional level and have that effect of liberating others like you do, is phenomenal. And that's truly what I think you do really well, and it's made me a great fan.
Thanks.
And truly appreciate it. I'm looking forward to developing a deeper relationship and
100%.
sharing some of these experiences.
Yeah, we'll get you on the podcast in the new year. I'm
That'd
taking
be
a couple
great.
weeks off for mental health. I found I was overworking myself, and I know when
Rest
I have
is
to stop
important.
now. Rest is important. You come back stronger.
Awesome.
The question I had is, what's the significance of those for you? Because I have the chakras, but what are yours?
So this one's very special. Master and Dr. Shah, who is a mind, body, soul healer.
Can we show the people? I don't know if they can see or not.
So
but
these were blessed, each mind, body, soul healer. These are actually just more common beads that a client gave me.
Yeah.
But these are very special. I believe that you carry karma from many past lives, not to offend anyone. Yeah, and so I actually trace calligraphies. Just to end on this, because I think it's important. I do all kinds of freaky things. Matt and I are discussing things that people are like, oh, geez, these two guys are way out there. Here's what I tell you.
it's a little esoteric.
Yeah, I love this. This is how I evaluate things. Does this have any risk? No. Does that have a risk? No. Going into the chamber has no risk. But if it works for you, keep doing it. And when it stops working, so that's why I trace calligraphies. That's why I read the Course in Miracles, which I suggest for you as well. You are right to, oh yeah, you can go to acim.org online. There's lessons every day.
Okay.
When you talk, what's funny, I remember talking to Gary Vee, and I had the same kind of talk. He goes, I'll talk to you next year when you think that you're enlightened, the unraveling. That's what I think. 4 years I've been studying the Course in Miracles, and every year I read, I'm like, was this here? Like, I'm a whole new unraveled being, and I can see you elevating that you're gonna say, God, this was my perception of the ego. I talked to Dave last year. Now, Dave, listen to this, right? There's so many layers to it. Anyway, this is unbelievable. Matt Santoro, it is destiny that we met on an airplane.
It was serendipitous, brother, absolutely.
For sure, and I look forward to many great things from you and pray for happiness and peace in 2019 for you. I know it's coming your way.
Thank you, thank you.
Attract all you wish. Namaste. This is the Buddhist version of Entrepreneurs, the Playbook. If you want to learn about someone else that's able to shift his perspective about anxiety, just click the episode of Bradley Martin right here.
That whole catalyst in my life has become the thing that has also like given me all my gifts. As shitty as it is and as shitty as it could be for anybody, and in difference, it doesn't have to be that age, any age, I realized that like that was the thing that gave me all my perspective.